Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Gulsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
Welcome to Wild Turkey Science. I just loved that that little clip that they put at the end of the TFT video that they put together with Dave Owens.
Yeah.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was very, very good. I really enjoyed it.
That teaser trailer, and at the very end it showed you there in the studio, and you just said,
"Well,
welcome to Wild Turkey Science." I was like, man, I'm ready for kickoff now. I mean, it's just like, let's go.
Yeah. We'll just say I wasn't prepared for that to be in video form.
Man, I'm just going to tell you, I don't know if it was your voice or your physical appearance, but it gave me chills.
Well, it was probably my appearance, and it was probably not a positive chill. Yeah. Well, we have been through week 1 in the first series.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, this is our first recording since we've launched.
Yes, and just for the folks out there, this is a bonus episode inspired by you.
Absolutely.
And, we said we wanted y'all to be involved, and I meant it. And I feel like people are pretty involved. We've gotten tons of feedback, and we felt compelled to come back and talk about some of the feedback, and please keep that coming. I would love to say that it was all positive, but there was some negative. Seems like we have ruffled some feathers, to use that pun again. It seems like we managed to make everybody mad on some part of it, and then there were a lot of happy people on some parts of it, and then there was, just some general support, and which we really, really appreciate. But yeah, I can't state enough how much I appreciated everybody reaching out. We had people sending us data. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know everything that's going on everywhere. I don't know about every data set that there is. I don't know the ins and outs of every single state's turkey season structure. Those kinds of things. People were bringing to our attention things that I think are really cool and valid points. And when we talked about this, I felt like this is the right thing for us to do, is to respond. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to be objective and give everybody a voice. If you have data or you have questions or you disagree, we are going to address that directly.
Yeah.
And I think our audience appreciates that. And a bunch of people have told me that. And I've gotten, I know you have too, but I've gotten just like lists of questions and stuff, through all various forms.
Yeah.
I've gotten them on Instagram. I've gotten them on through email, text message, word of mouth.
Yeah. Phone calls.
Yes. Yeah.
I've had a couple phone calls. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't state enough how overwhelming it was, really, to be honest with you, this week 1.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, there was some negative feedback too, which I think sometimes can be just as valuable as long as it's, constructive criticism.
Yeah.
But overall, I was absolutely humbled by the positive feedback we got. And particularly, I feel like, I don't know about you, Marcus, but probably the number one comment that I got was Thank you so much. Like, this is the kind of information
Mm-hmm.
that we've been longing for a while.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing this to us. And I'm glad that people felt that way. But, to kind of build off of what you said, this needs to be a conversation.
Yes.
Because if we shut down conversations, we quit learning.
Yeah.
And so it's just like our conversations with the guests that we have on to interview, some of which have very differing opinions. Like, it's important for all those conversations to occur, because it's not until you lay all that out on the table that you can start sorting through the pieces. It's like putting a puzzle together. You got to get all those pieces out on the table, and you got to move them around,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes many times, before you figure out how they all fit together. And as long as we keep having this conversation, I think we move that forward.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, I like to think that we're really doing a good job of trying to bring people together. That, for a long time, I think that's what is discouraging to a lot of people, and it certainly has done to me. We all want more turkeys.
Hmm.
There is some argument over how to make that happen and how
Yes.
effective one practice is versus another. And, we have some disagreement there, but it's not personal. We all want the same thing. The National Wild Turkey Federation and Turkeys for Tomorrow want the same thing. The
Hmm.
people that are, subscribing to this or that are gaining memberships in those organizations, they probably have a lot of overlap in that. We all
Hmm.
want the same thing, and I'm just uh, I'm inspired by all of our feedback, but ultimately that's what we want to get to. We all want more turkeys, and we need to be doing this together. And we can have some disagreement and discussion, but it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's business that we're
Yeah.
trying to make, but good conservation decisions to increase turkeys.
Yep. So
So
that's, I think, exactly why the conversation is so important, because if you're not having conversations, you're not coming together and building that collective that can work towards this shared objective, right?
right, yeah, I think we're all learning from this, and that is my objective in doing this. In part, is for me to grow and learn what to tell people, but also I hope that is the goal of the listeners to listen to what we talk about, the data we uncover. We're trying to make it as transparent and available as possible. Go follow us on different platforms of social media. We are literally going to cover those papers. We're a little
Hmm.
bit delayed. I was planning on doing that multiple times this week, and instead I was fielding questions in the DM.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we're delayed. I didn't get them out last week like I intended to, but they will get there. They're
Right.
just not there yet. I know that you and I both have several things lined up, but another thing that before we really start jumping into some deep conversation about what's going on in turkeys and the feedback and addressing points. One thing that was pretty obvious to me is there were some themes in questions.
Hmm.
And what we want this thing to be successful, and we want that feedback, and there are a couple of ways that our audience can help us be more successful that I think it will also help consolidate uh, questions so that people know their questions being addressed or maybe not. And I thought about it'd be a really great thing if you're listening and you want to help us be successful, take a minute to rate the podcast. And if you have a question that you want us to address, use that as your review.
Yeah.
I think it only allows you to review it once. So if you have more than one question, which I'm sure there are plenty of people that do, we've certainly had some of those people reach out already, then please share those questions in other places. But at least if we all do it as a review, not only is it helping us with the podcast being successful, and not only is it helping us do that, but also the audience can see each other's questions,
Hmm.
and we can get that dialogue there. but also, it makes it easy, I guess, for everybody to contribute. And if you've already rated it and left a review, thank you for doing that. We really appreciate it. And I'm happy to take those via email or DM, whatever. But I thought that might be a good way for our audience to do it. And if they want us to keep having bonus episodes, keep providing that feedback, because we felt compelled this time to, record a bonus episode. We already have the next series recorded and ready to go, and we are recording this now, after the fact, because of the feedback. And I think that is an amazing thing, and really inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm a pretty, I guess I would consider myself a pretty big consumer of podcasts for the past several years. And, you always hear podcast hosts say, leave a rating and a review. And I'd always kind of just glossed over that because I didn't really understand the importance of it till, we started this show and how available our podcast is to people on various platforms, especially people that don't know about it and try to go directly to it. If they're just looking for like turkey hunting information or turkey management information, which would be more relevant to us, of course, and they search for that, we're not going to come up unless, we start to get to some threshold of reviews. Otherwise, we're just buried and no one will ever find it. So,
yeah, we need Apple and Spotify and all those places that people are finding it on it. We need them to help us help people find it. And that's what that does. And we already, I mean, it's been unbelievable. I don't know how many ratings and everything we've gotten, but the overwhelming positivity has just been really special, and I can't thank people enough.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank y'all. One other thing I just thought of, Will, are you planning to go to the convention? Because I thought if people are going to the convention and you want to talk to us, that would be a good opportunity to talk face to face, and I will be first one in line to talk to you and hear your thoughts or whatever.
Yeah, we're both planning to be there. I have actually a landowner turkey workshop. It's the first one ever hosted by Turkeys for Tomorrow. That's local here.
Where is it?
Yeah, it's at Central Alabama Community College, and that is on Friday, February 17th. I think it starts. I think it starts like late afternoon, somewhere around that time. I don't have the flyer pulled up. I'm sorry, but if you go to Turkeys for Tomorrow's Instagram page or their Facebook, they have it advertised there with more details.
Yeah, and I think I saw that on their website too.
Yeah, and the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service should also have it advertised somewhere, probably on their social media channels.
So
but if you're local here, that would be an opportunity for a face-to-face as well.
Yeah, so can anybody sign up for it, or is it okay?
Yeah,
That's
I'm pretty
cool.
sure. I'm pretty sure.
It's habitat focused.
It will be habitat focused, but I'll also be providing a research update on the work that I've got going on in Alabama and talking directly to some of that. And then we've scheduled a pretty good bit of time at the end of my talk for me to take some questions, either directly related to my talk or, if people have questions about the podcast, they can feel free to ask those too. But again, that's February 17th in the evening at Central Alabama Community College. And you can check out Turkeys for Tomorrow's Facebook or Instagram page for more information on that. And so that doesn't get over. Of course, that overlaps with the convention.
Yeah, I was going to say that's right in the middle of it. So,
right.
But you're still going to.
Yeah. So
I
I'll
know
be
we
done.
talked about going, but.
Yeah. So I'll be done with that Friday evening. And then I'll be packing up directly after that workshop and driving up to Nashville. And then hopefully you and I can link up. And then I think we're going to spend some time around the convention together on Saturday, the 18th. And that'll be our main day to try to meet up with people.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll probably, I have some business at University of Tennessee with a graduate student committee right before the convention, and I'll probably just go on over after that. So I'm not sure exactly what dates, but planning to be there nonetheless. So that's great, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done a bunch of those kinds of events myself. I haven't done any with Turkeys for Tomorrow, but I have with NWTF before, and a variety of other kinds of events, and they're always really fun and great place to get a lot of good information out and hear from the audience. Hear about what they want to learn about, which then go. I know you do the same thing. We take that home and then design science to try to deliver that information. So next time we have better answers if we don't already.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. They probably a lot of people would be surprised how many of those conversations after a talk have prompted
Mm-hmm.
me to, give you or another colleague a call or a text and be like, "Hey, this landowner brought up this thing to me. I thought it was, a really interesting perspective, and I think we could maybe incorporate that into some of the ongoing research we have, or wouldn't it be cool to get a project along those lines started up eventually in the future?"
Yeah. Yep. It's good stuff. That's what the same thing online. That feedback,
Yeah.
is so important. I just I relish it. I try to answer everything that anybody asks me. Sometimes I get delayed, but I just it's such an important part of for it to be a conversation. It's important. So,
Reaching
but that
reaching out reaching out from the ivory tower instead of just sitting up on the throne, right?
well, yeah, I don't know about ivory tower around here.
The only ivory tower I know of is in my bathroom.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you want to let's jump into some of this stuff?
All right. I'll start with
So,
one.
okay, go ahead. Take the floor,
I have one that's
please.
I have one that's an icebreaker. Okay, it's an easy
Is
start.
it a turkey hunting story?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not a turkey hunting story, but but I did get a comment that said, "So which podcast is this replacing?" And I thought about it for a little bit, and there can only be one answer because we're both very ambitious, right? It's clearly the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh yeah.
We're going all the way to number one.
Joe asked me if I'd come on his show to advertise it, and I was like, you know what? I don't think you're ready for that, Joe.
Joe, and I
We
don't
need to get to know each other better first.
and I don't know if you've watched the Meat Eater episode where Joe goes turkey hunting with Steve Ranella, but Joe
No.
does not seem to be a big turkey hunting fan. I think I think he was underwhelmed by that experience. Now, if we take him on the right one and they're just burning the woods down, maybe we can
Yes.
win him over.
Yes. I don't understand how anybody could not be just absolutely infatuated with that experience if they have it.
Yeah.
It's a special thing. So that's the one, huh?
That's the one. That's my icebreaker. Your turn.
Yeah. Well, I think there are quite a few questions that have come up that we should address. And I want to go out and say one of those things is about predation and trapping, and that's our next series.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that. We are not avoiding it. We literally have already uploaded it into the feed, and you're gonna be getting that.
4 episodes?
I believe it is. Yeah.
At least I know it's at least 3.
So I am not sidestepping that at all
Right.
by saying we don't want to go into detail in it. We literally have already recorded it.
Yeah. And
So and I think it's about as balanced on the topic and the most in depth that I've ever heard from the literature. The research data driven standpoint.
Yeah. And it's a good example of if somebody wants to see how we can potentially even move our opinions when
Mm-hmm.
confronted with data, that series is kind of I think both, I don't want to speak for you, but for me, I know personally my current thoughts on predator control for turkeys evolved throughout that
Yes.
episode series.
Yes.
I still think it needs to be placed in the proper context. There's a time and a place. There's things that need to be addressed before, well before any predator control is considered. But there is potentially a place for it within a management program.
Yeah. Well, we go into it in great detail, and I'm exactly the same way. I really was challenged through that whole process, and we have another episode which we are pending recording, but we know the context of it and the data behind it, and it's going to really shake some stuff up.
Yeah. It definitely flipped the way that I think about nest predation for turkeys.
Yeah.
Nest predation on turkeys on its head.
Yes.
If that's not a teaser, I don't know what is.
I'm going to go ahead and clip that one.
Maybe I need to say it twice because that first time wasn't that clear, but
well, why don't you just go ahead and repeat that? Well,
it flipped the way that I think about nest predation on turkeys on its head. How's that?
Yeah, can you say it like you mean it? I'm kidding. Don't say that again. Yeah, so that's something, that's one of those issues too, that there are people on both there are people that are very avid supporters of that practice, and then people that are avid supporters of that being, a later option in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or there are also people that don't think it's even an option.
Right.
And I think we made all of them mad. So, yeah, tune in to those episodes. I mean, I think it's going to be the best, most well-rounded discussion on it that a lot of people have ever heard.
Right.
But for some reason, that one just really gets everybody fired up.
Mm-hmm.
You had one of those that emerged in the commentary on some of your online stuff as well.
Which one?
Burning during nesting.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know how that came up.
I definitely had that one. So the way that came up is that comment was left on one of those reels that I posted that had the clip with Craig. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it the one where he was talking about 12% of nests being destroyed by No. I'm sorry. Okay. That came up in the clip with Coulter Chitwood, Dr. Chitwood at Oklahoma State, where he mentioned that in areas with declining populations of turkeys, there's no excuse to shoot a hen. We shouldn't be harvesting hens in those areas with declining populations.
Yeah. By the way, just to remind you, that clip is from an episode that has not aired when people hear this, or the first ones.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the thing with the teaser, right? It's intentionally teasing people with the content, but you don't necessarily get the full context. But that interview with Dr. Chitwood that's upcoming is powerful.
And if you like some deep science, we'll give it to you on that one.
Yeah, that one, I really struggled to keep up with him because it's pretty in depth on, math. We'll just say that and say it easy. But
which you and I have never claimed is our strong suit.
Nah, that's above where I could reach. What a wonderful contribution those guys are making. They've literally gone through the literature and gotten all of the vital rates from turkeys and used all that in this big model to look at how the populations are going. And that manuscript it'll probably be published by the time that episode airs, is my guess. But what a wonderful resource for us.
Yeah.
And when I say us, I mean anyone that cares about turkeys.
Right.
And I'm planning to make that thing wide open. Like, we're going to make that available to everybody. So excited about that. But I just wanted to remind you that clip. They haven't actually heard the content
and
yet.
just as a sneak preview to build off what Marcus said, what that model showed, that one of the most sensitive vital rates that affects population growth rates is hen survival. And so that was the justification behind that statement that Chitwood made.
Yeah. So they put all those vital rates together, and hen survival was particularly important.
Yeah, yeah. And so that led a couple of followers to comment that, if it's that important not to shoot hens, isn't it as equally important not to burn nests?
Well, let me
And
ask you directly, Will. Is it the nest itself? I don't care if it's burned or eaten or whatever happens to it. An elephant steps on it. Is what are those two equal?
no, they're not.
Why?
Because you shoot a hen and you lose lifetime reproduction. You know, an
Yeah.
egg or a nest is, a single reproductive event. We know that even within a nesting season, a hen can re-nest up to a couple times. The probability of success of those nests goes way down with subsequent
Mm-hmm.
attempts. So that's not desirable. But this is a species that is adapted to
Yeah.
losing individuals through mortality because it's a prey
Well,
species,
well, and that's not.
and it's adapted to losing eggs too, and to losing nests.
Yeah. Well, that's not to diminish the value of that nest,
No, no,
but it's
and
not. They're not the same importance. They're just not.
right, and to place this in the proper context of where the follower was coming from, they have experience with a particular tract of public hunting ground where multi-thousand acre fires are regularly conducted
Mm-hmm.
during the nesting season. And I would never suggest that practice be implemented on a regular basis, especially chronic nesting season fire on a property with the objective of trying to make more turkeys.
Yeah, not at
Uh,
that spatial scale. There's no question.
right.
Another thing that reminded me, and I know we've kind of beaten this horse, and that you can give us feedback on that too. If you're tired of us saying stuff, then tell us.
Quit talking about
But
X. Yeah.
but uh, the other thing that we get that feedback a lot. That's one of my most common questions. I mean, on Fire University, we've
Hmm.
had episodes directly on burning during nesting with a variety of different people. I get invited on them all the time. I was on Spring Legion recently, and we talked about it. I've addressed that issue directly many times. We were both on Dear You, and I kind of threw you under the bus jokingly, but both of us are prepared to handle that issue. But uh, because we've already gotten feedback on that, and we always know, especially when you get around about April, that's going to be the talk of the town.
Hmm.
We got another expert who I have never heard on a podcast talk about it, but he's potentially the most well positioned person to do so since
Yeah.
he has had studies that a lot of us, including me, reference that literally tracked nesting on public land in a context where the burn units were relatively large and looked at how it impacted hens nesting. And he's
Hmm.
also done that with a bunch of other ground nesting bird species.
Right.
So we invited Chris Moorman, who's a professor at North Carolina State University. It was my PhD advisor. We invited him, and I just found out today he accepted coming on for us to record with that. So that's
Hmm.
coming soon, folks.
Yeah.
We're going to go in that in detail. And I think it's another testament, not only that are we trying to respond to the audience, that is one of those issues that people get really bent out of shape about.
You could
Just about
almost
everybody.
you could almost say they get fired up about it.
Yeah, I didn't want to use that. I almost did. You saw it. Yeah.
I mean, you already used ruffling feathers today, so
Yeah.
there's my
Count
pun
it.
for the day.
Count it. Uh, that's one of those issues that gets everybody really bent out of shape, and we're going to go right after it
Yeah.
because we need to have these conversations. I want the folks that are getting upset about it or that are defending positions on these kinds of things to know what we know.
And
That's
to
the
their
goal.
credit, I will say that if that's your only piece of ground to hunt and you're seeing that occur year after year and you're coming across multiple nests that are burned up, how could you not feel passionate about that issue?
Yeah, no, I completely understand it. That's why we should, there's we're outlining that there is reason for concern if you're in that situation. That is a perfectly reasonable concern, and we
Hmm.
want you to have the data on it,
Right. And
the
the thing
best
that I
available science that there is, and there is published work on that, and we're going to have the person that published it that led that work on the show to talk about it directly.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about Chris is he is a true avian ecologist. And
Yeah.
by that, I mean he has studied, a variety of species of birds, including a variety of ground nesting species of birds like turkeys. And that allows him, similar to some of the stuff we did in the predator episode where we had to lean on data from other species because
Mm-hmm.
it lacked on turkeys. So that gives him a more well-rounded kind of holistic perspective and knowledge base that he can share from. And so I
Yeah.
think ultimately it results in conversations with him being more informative.
Yes, I agree. Because as we talk about with turkeys, we don't have a lot of data on that. We do
Hmm.
have some. I'm pretty sure he's been an author on most of it. But he has also led work on northern bobwhite on that issue, which is very similar. And obviously, they co-occur in a lot of places. Fire is a big part of them, their co-occurrence. Uh, he also has done it with Bachman sparrow. Same Same kind of deal. He's done it with a variety of birds like that,
Hmm.
that we could draw pretty strong inference on it.
Yep. And he's a hunter
So,
too.
yep, I
So he
have
understands.
sat on a tree with him. One day, maybe we'll do it while he's on the show because it's funny to hear him because he doesn't tell the story the same way I do.
Of course.
Maybe we'll kind of pick at him about that. But I was sitting on the tree with him when big old Tom came in and he shot it. And he shot it with my shotgun. I have a Mossberg that we were using at the time, and that thing. He was like, "This thing is like 12 foot long." He's like, "I feel like your shotgun was a limb that fell off the pine tree we were sitting on."
Is it a is it a is it an old was it an old 835?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh man, I still
yeah, and it
turkey hunt
has
with one of those.
the screw in choke at the end that extends it an extra.
Oh, it's about 32 feet long.
Yeah, well, and it's heavy, you know. Uh, but it's
No,
just it's so funny, and we should have that dialogue. There's no reason we can't have a few hunting stories on
well,
here too.
yeah, and that's what I've been thinking about, man. I've always turkey hunted with that gun. I got it in middle school for good
Oh, you've
grades.
got one too.
Yeah, I got an 835 Ultimag. I got it in middle
Yeah,
school for good
that's
grades.
amazing.
It was back during the time I can remember exactly how Mossberg marketed it. It was one of the first 12 gauges chambered in 3.5 inch for 3.5 inch
Yep.
shells, and they said 10 gauge performance out of a 12 gauge. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
And I remember the
I don't
first
remember
time.
the detail that you do, but I can remember that all
Well,
coming
it was
together.
because at that time in my life I coveted that gun.
Yes.
Who cares? It was a $200 shotgun, right? It was
Yeah.
all I wanted in this world. And I can
Yeah.
remember the first time I ever took it out to the gun range. Dad bought a box of 3.5 inch loads. We put some birdshot through it first, and he
Yeah.
was like, "You got to shoot one of these," And I'm
It
pretty
would
sure
put a
that the
hurt
gun
on you.
jumped out of my hands, because I was
Yeah.
probably, I don't know, at that time maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, probably not even
Mm.
that. Um,
That's a
so
yeah. That's
anyways,
a
I love that gun so much, and it's always been old reliable for me. But I kind of want to upgrade because I'm tired of lugging it around, but I just can't bring
mhm.
myself to do it.
Yeah. I still hunt with mine.
Do you?
Yep. We
Well, I've been.
actually got a like a hand or a custom paint job on it,
Oh,
and now it's kind
nice.
of worn off, so it's sort of like it really looks
Ooh,
rustic
it's
now.
got that patina on it.
Yeah,
That means it's done some killing.
yeah. There's a few feathers stuck on it,
Yeah, yeah.
from a bloody turkey.
Well, I
But
remember I went to a. Are we telling too many hunting stories? I guess
I
we could
think
always cut this out.
we need to get back to it. I think
Okay, okay.
we're gonna lose our audience that are trying to listen to some science.
All right.
All right. Well, what you got one? What's another one?
Yeah, I think this was a really good one. I think this. Do we name listeners, or do you think we just leave them
Why don't we
anonymous?
let people go tell us? Like, do you want us to name who you are
Okay.
or
Well,
not?
we'll
And
leave it
we'll
out for
wait.
now. But
Yeah.
so I had a follower ask, and I think this was in reference to um, the Dear You episode that we recorded, talking about the podcast, and before that, we talked about overlap in deer and turkey management and how they differ. And one of the
Hmm.
things that I brought up on that, I can't remember the context of how we got to it, but Bronson was talking about or asking us a question about managing food plots, and I mentioned something about edge feathering and then allowing a portion of the food plot to remain fallow, and you might use
Yeah.
some rotational disking to maintain brooding at the edge of the field where it's fallow, and then allow the edge feathered area as you transition into the forest to be a little bit more brushy to provide some good nesting cover. And
Yes.
so that's the
I was
background.
going to just interrupt you real quick. I
Yeah.
got a very similar question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so one of our followers asked, could you just use an irregular corner of a food plot for that purpose? And so what I'm assuming is he means, just allow a regular corner of a food plot to go fallow and let that serve as either nesting or brooding cover, depending on, how long it's been since disturbance. And I went ahead and replied online, and my general thought on that is if you already have a good bit of pre-existing brooding cover on your property, then I don't necessarily think that would be a bad contribution to try to maximize the amount of that usable space for brooding. But if you're in a situation like so many landowners are, where brooding cover is highly limited across the property, I would have some real concerns about isolating it to an area that small and potentially creating,
Mm-hmm.
a trap for brood,
Right.
so to speak. So and what that essentially means is you're giving that hen and her brood some cue that this is suitable habitat for brood rearing, but it's so small and isolated, and predators can learn,
Mm-hmm.
where animals that are their prey frequent over time, and so they may start to key in on that feature of the landscape. And this
Yeah.
is something that we've seen happen with a lot of species, and I've done some work directly related to fawning cover and trying to manage habitat to avoid coyote predation on fawns. Is it seems like if even if it's high quality cover, if it's too limited or isolated, it can actually have a negative effect. And
Yeah.
so,
You had that one study that, where the one where you were looking at edge. I know you've talked about it a bunch,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah. And then I also worked on a study like that where we had really, really defined areas for fawning, and we measured it and
hmm,
demonstrated that it did indeed make the fawns more vulnerable because of the arrangement of the high quality cover. It was
hmm,
really narrow linear strips in this landscape,
hmm,
that were 10 or 15 yards wide, and it was the best place to nest. So they, or nest, well, that too, but it was the best placed fawn in our study that we were
yeah,
doing, and those fawns were at more risk when they used that because it was so easy to hunt. So that integrates into a lot of the discussion with the predators. Your habitat management, not just whether or not you're getting fire and sunlight on the ground, but also how you're arranging it,
yeah,
can influence predators.
right,
There's no question about that. We have data on their movements. They will avoid places generally, or at least some of them generally avoid places that are really high quality for
hmm,
nesting and brooding. And, that's an additive effect on the fact that this turkeys or whatever species, prey species of interest, is better able to hide and often feed themselves. All this different things that are all adding up to higher success for the turkey.
yeah. And I think
So
I think in general, a useful analogy for predator prey dynamics as it pertains to habitat is a needle in a haystack, right?
yeah,
Would you rather search for a needle through a regular square bale of hay or through a big round bale, you know?
hmm
And so we want the habitat that we're providing for that prey species to avoid predators in to be as large as possible to make the predator searching behavior as inefficient as possible.
yeah. And you're also bound with in the case of like poult rearing, you're also balancing that with providing it a crawl space
Yeah.
better. In other words, you can't just have all your brooding in one part of the property because it may not be accessible for hens that nest too far away from it to get their poults
Hmm.
there. So having that spread out, so you're trying to balance those two. We're going to get into habitat a lot, but
Yeah.
uh, of course, especially after talking to Craig, because we got into habitat some in that episode, even though we really intended it to be on season date stuff and that
Right.
experiment as great to address that question. Uh, of course, we got some habitat questions. So, but let's I got a very similar thing, and it sounds like we responded really similarly. That edge feathering can be a really great way to have a gradual transition from really high sunlight to low sunlight environment,
Mm-hmm.
where you can create juxtapose brooding and nesting cover and even loafing if you're getting to really low sunlight, that could provide some value as well. uh, Another thing that I think we need to talk about, that is related to the hunting. Some One of the listeners asked me about the dominant birds, and if there's any concern with newer hunting techniques that might make
Mm.
them vulnerable, and we definitely want to cover that. Uh, the problem right now, which is people are going to get tired of us beating this drum, but uh, I'm not aware of any data showing hunting method changing which individuals are are targeted. But you can imagine how some things, uh, let's back up. If you have a mating system like the turkeys, where there's a dominant individual, and think about that big strutter out in the middle of the field with a harem of hens, and maybe there's a couple of satellite gobblers or whatever. But if we can change it such that he wasn't vulnerable to now he is the most vulnerable, there are other ways that hunting could influence fitness, or in other words, reproductive success of the bird, that are plausible.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, you could, and I know we'll get into this with the episode we've already recorded with Brett Collier. That's going to be a while down the road right now for the listeners, but uh, that was one of the things that he talked about, is the male fitness, and how that might influence things.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem that we have with turkeys right now is that we don't have clear evidence, that is a thing.
Yeah.
That first of all, that is happening. I think we would have to rely on anecdotes. But the other thing is that if that has a fitness consequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So uh, that's a great question. I think we've got to talk about it directly, and we know the right people to try to talk on that issue.
Yeah.
But
And it seems a little abstract, probably even to me at first, to think about. First of all, you would have to assume that it does make dominant birds more vulnerable. Like you said, we don't even have established data on that yet. But if it did, there's a variety of reasons. I guess like one concrete example of why disproportionately taking those birds out of the population may have a long-term fitness consequence. And the one that immediately comes to mind is, we're talking about, as part of this broader turkey conversation right now, um, newly found diseases that are challenging turkey populations,
mhm,
relatively new diseases in the wild that turkeys haven't contended with for that long. That bird may have risen to his dominance position for a variety of reasons, but one of them may have been that he's more healthy because he's less susceptible to a disease that's endemic in the
mhm.
population. And he's
Yeah,
got
there.
some genetic quality that makes him more
Yeah,
resilient against that. And that's definitely something we would want to see passed on. And we're
yeah,
not, just to be clear, we're not saying this is occurring. There's a lot of gaps between
yeah.
point A and where
We
I'm,
do not have the data on that.
yeah,
But
and where I'm
there
at
are
right now.
some bird species that have elaborate mating systems in some parts of the world where there is better data on that,
Right.
and there is a measurable effect. We're not. I agree with you. We're not saying that is contributing to any of the patterns that we're seeing in nature, but it is an alternative hypothesis.
I mean,
And
yeah,
that,
hypothetically, there's ways that it could happen.
yeah. So that was a good one. Great. And we will address that with the whole episode, hopefully. But we're also trying to, I want that to be clear that that's an alternative hypothesis, but I also want to be clear we're a little bit hesitant to talk about it in depth because we don't have any data.
It's just so much speculation.
Yeah, it's basically all speculation at that point.
All right, you ready for another one?
Well, this one was a two-part, and then
oh, okay.
The other thing the same person brought up is something about testosterone and whether or not if we shoot a gobbler that has high testosterone, isn't there there's some data maybe that the other gobblers are being suppressed in their testosterone. I know that this is more in line with the things that you're better to talk about than me. So.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of akin to what we just talked about, that there are some biological mechanisms that you could invoke to explain that being a possibility.
So that like a dominant male could suppress subdominant males or subordinate males.
Yes.
The testosterone.
It is plausible, but it is far from measured, to my knowledge, in wild populations.
Okay.
And
but that's something that you were doing in the Alabama study, right?
Yeah, so we collected over 400 sets of testes from gobblers across the state. And I say gobblers, and I mean gobblers because we had like 3 jakes, I think, that were submitted to us. And we've got to do some additional quantitative analysis on that. And
so
we're actually so right now all I have are testes weights from all these birds, right?
Well, let's wait.
And
but I'm glad. So you're going to have some data to speak to this directly.
Yeah, so we're going to have to do, long story short, we're going to have to do some microscopic examination of those to look at what stage they are in terms of spermatogenesis.
Nice.
I'm glad that cracked you up.
Well, I'm just like, we'll just leave it at that.
All right. Yeah, you probably shouldn't go there.
Yeah. I don't know where you think I was going, but I just we're science sometimes is weird.
Yeah,
but it's great information. I'm glad that you're working on it, and I'm excited for us to talk about it when you have some results. But I just wanted the listeners to know that we will definitely.
We'll have some direct data on that to share, probably maybe late summer, early fall.
Okay, so not that long. Let's see. Oh, you have one. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this one was actually in reference to the clip that we shared of Craig talking about mowing, and that in that Tennessee study they lost about 12% of their nest just from mowing, being destroyed by a mower. I had a follower comment on that clip on Facebook, who actually I went to high school with, and
cool.
and so now he's helping manage a relatively large property that they. I think they intensively manage it for both deer hunting and turkey hunting in South Georgia. And he told me, I thought this was a really good idea. He said that not only have they implemented this policy called No Mow May. It's kind of a mouthful. It was easy to read, but when I said it, I don't know, it's kind of catchy. I like it. But they don't mow from late April through the 1st of June, whereas that used to be a big time of the year where they would do a lot of mowing. And that's not the only thing they've changed on the property. He said that they've also been doing some pretty intensive feral pig control on that property as well. Yeah. So that's probably helping too. But he feels like between the combination of those two actions that they've seen really strong turkey responses across the farm. And specifically, he said that throughout the summer, they would commonly see about 50 to 75 adult birds, throughout the summer across the farm. That was 5 years ago. And now, keep in mind, this is a several thousand acre property, but they're seeing 300 to 400 adult birds now. And he thinks that them ceasing mowing during that peak nesting period has made a major contribution to that. So I thought that was really cool and figured I'd share.
Yeah, that is cool. I'm glad you brought that up. And thanks to that listener for providing that comment. That's great. Yeah.
Sounds like a hashtag we need to start. No Mow May.
Well, maybe so. Maybe so. To me, that was there are a couple of things that Craig said that just like shook me when I heard it. And he's that kind of guy. I mean, our audience knows he's well articulated and funny and just easy to learn about.
A little provocative.
And he's super knowledgeable, obviously. But that not only was only 7% or single digit percentage of the landscape something for nesting and brooding. Then on top of that, 12% of the nests in their huge sample size, 12% of the nests in those really good areas were being lost to mowing. Like I can't. That really took me, and I didn't even articulate my shock well in the moment because we talked about it before when we're going back and forth really fast with people and we don't know what they're going to say. And then they say something like that, and it's like, oh, you can't even get your thoughts together to respond.
And you're trying to hold at the same time something in your mind that you want to circle back to.
Yes, exactly. And they're on their train, and buddy, you want them to go, and you just let them go. And that was one of those moments for me. But the idea that, I mean, if I told you that I could save you a lot of money and time and sweat and increase nest success instantaneously by 12%. Most people jump right on that.
Mm-hmm.
They jump right on that ship, and we're going to sail. And to me, that was kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
So think about that for a minute. We're in what is the problem there? Right. The first problem is having 3 or 4% of the landscape be nesting cover or brooding cover. At least the ideal. That's problem number one. And then we're going to mow some of it up at the wrong time. We're going to talk a lot about these practices in our habitat episodes, which are we'll eventually get to. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. What makes it even more remarkable to me is that small proportion of the landscape, 12% of nests are being lost there due to mowing. And I don't remember the exact number, but still nest success was greater in those areas than it was, I think, in the surrounding forest.
When it wasn't just better, it was a lot better.
It was a lot better.
I don't remember the numbers. If you want to know them, go listen to the episode again.
So it's like we're going to go ahead and put these hens at a 12% deficit off the bat, and they're still going to outperform those hens over there in the woods.
Yeah, by far. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that one up because I didn't think of it that way. But that's why we're doing this. We're trying to challenge you, and you may not like it sometimes. And I certainly don't sometimes with the feedback that we get, but we're trying to stay on point here. This is about turkeys. Doesn't matter if I like it or not.
That's right.
I like turkeys, and I want to have more of them. So I'm blanking on. I had a follow up to that was really good. Do you have another thing, and we can move on, and I'll come back to it if I remember it.
Yeah, we can. Mine was kind of big picture, and I didn't know if it was something that we necessarily wanted to talk about today. So if you don't want to, that's fine. We can move on because we have the recap episode, right? That's going to drop Monday of this week. So this episode will air Thursday. That one will air on Monday. But so I guess we can go ahead and talk about it at the cost of maybe reiterating something that we discussed in that episode. But I had a couple of folks respond on my page saying kind of their synopsis or their summary of their major takeaways from the season date series. And the one that I thought was the most succinct and well thought out was they took away number one, that habitat is the most important thing that you can do for turkey populations. Do you agree with that?
In the landscape, and this has been consistent, we named multiple studies where they measured how much of the landscape was available to the turkeys to do their business in, and we're in single digits.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't think that's refutable.
Yeah. And then furthermore, you talk about, and this is, I feel like all we're doing is teasing future episodes, but We've
that's
got
part
one.
of this.
Yeah, we've got one that's going to be dropping in a few weeks where we spent a good bit of time, or at least you did, and I think you brought this up in the maybe in the conversation with Dr. Chamberlain briefly too. But you can look to Texas, South Texas, is a prime example of how much turkey production goes up and down as a function of habitat, which in that case is driven by rainfall. So no rain, no plants. Lots of rain,
Right.
lots of plants, lots of insects,
It even
lots of
goes further.
poults.
Right. Yeah. No rain, no plants, associated things with plants, including turkeys.
Yes.
No productivity. Lots
Yeah.
of rain, lots of productivity in turkeys, and the predator population stays relatively stable.
Yeah.
Through that. There are
Right.
multiple studies showing it. We're going to cover them in detail.
Right.
That, I think, is very important.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought it up. Another thing that was brought to my attention that I think is critical here. Somebody asked me, and I have been racking my brain over it because it's bothering me now. What is happening to poults past that time that we're measuring them into winter flock? So I'm talking about jennies through the fall. Where are they going? Because we have a dramatically mismatched measurement of recruitment at those two time points and a complete void in the middle where we basically don't have any data.
Yeah. So you texted me this question the other day, and I remember my exact reply to it was, or I should say your question first, which was, what is happening to jennies in the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, apparently death.
Yeah, death
And
is happening.
being tongue in cheek. But as far as the evidence for that, we're seeing that time and again, and that's something that I've heard Dr. Chamberlain share, if not on our podcast, on some other ones that he's done, where he talks about in a lot of those hen flocks that they're capturing as part of his research efforts. I've seen it on our study sites. They almost have no jennies.
Yeah,
they're all adult hens.
yeah. Our Florida, we're small sample size, so I wouldn't hang my hat on it, but it's consistent with
Yeah.
the numbers that you guys are reporting on your larger sample sizes.
And
that's something we should probably get everybody together on with these. We got a lot of data on that now. I mean, just Chamberlain alone has a lot of data on that.
Yeah.
But with a bunch of these studies, we got tons of data on that particular thing. I think we need to put that data together better and collaborate. That's another place, like, we're all in this together. Let's make some more turkeys, and if we can learn more by putting all our data together, we should be doing that. But I think we could get one of these guys that has done a bunch of poult work to come on, and let's talk about why is that data gap there.
Yeah.
But something that Mike brought up, and I heard another scientist, and I'm failing to. It was not on the show, but another scientist mentioned that to me. That I think based on genetic work, there's some evidence that the females or the jennies are doing the dispersing. And they were, we're getting again into like a landscape connectivity problem potentially that could explain why the jakes seem to be doing, or we have a much better idea on what's going on with jakes because the numbers are much closer together in the fall or winter flock compared to they're during brooding.
Oh, I think you told me that was a conversation that you had with Adam Butler.
Yeah, but we were talking about another scientist.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I did talk to Adam about that. I called him and asked him because he's so knowledgeable about this stuff.
Yeah, and Adam said that going into fall, the sex ratio between jakes and jennies is pretty even.
Yeah, based on some of the data. And I asked him if he would come back and talk to us about that data because he hasn't presented it on here, but he has some really interesting insights into that. But that's something that we've got to get into that. Like, what are even the practical mechanisms that could be our alternative hypotheses? I mean, there are several. I can't think of how it would be related to hunting, but I could see it being several other things like that. Connectivity thing is immediately jumps to me, which then goes back to a habitat issue, most likely. But anyway,
But that's a data gap. That's a data gap. We
yeah.
don't have good information on what this year's hatch does throughout the fall and winter time.
Mm-hmm. So we're measuring what that productivity looks like early in polls, but then for females at least, that doesn't match what we see when we recapture the group in the winter.
Yeah.
So something's happening between those two.
Well, here I go, or I'm about to tease again, but we had this as part of a conversation in another upcoming episode where one of the reasons that hasn't been measured that often in the past is because, with universities, we've got graduate students conducting that research and they have to go back to class in fall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a reality that we face, but
yeah. Well, we have lots of limitations and we're trying to be very open about that here.
Yep.
And hopefully we're building trust with the audience that, we're trying to shoot you straight here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're addressing controversial issues and we're trying to give you different points of view and where the data is and where it isn't. So, did you have another one?
I don't know if you want this one.
Well,
I mean,
we shot around all the other ones. They're basically all the controversial things.
So you started out the recap episode that aired earlier this week, putting this question to me. So I'll just put it back to you. Another main takeaway that one of our listeners got from last week is that harvest is not the issue causing the turkey decline. Agree or disagree?
I will have to say we have some evidence from the best two experiments that we have seen data on. That it's not peer-reviewed data, but it does not support that's a primary mechanism. However, it is not that definitive.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of room for hunting to be playing a role here. And it probably is to some degree.
Right.
I would go as far to say that it's probably playing some role. But that, like we talked about earlier, that could be other things. It could be just how many, not the timing.
Mm-hmm.
Like what proportion it is. And we're going to get into that discussion more when we start talking about density dependent stuff, which is it, and we've already got recorded. It certainly could be playing a role, but those didn't show a really strong effect of the moving seasons, but we haven't adequately covered hunted versus unhunted, where you can compare populations that have the pressure to ones that don't.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some data that's been published that is comparing relatively high proportion of the males harvested to relatively low proportion, and that's that Millspaw paper. I forgot. Do you remember the lead author of it? We definitely should share this paper.
I know Isabel was on there too.
Yeah, Isabel was the second author, I think, and I cannot. He spoke at the symposium. I can't think of it. But anyway, we'll share this paper with everybody. It was published in 2022, so it's current. But they have some data in there from Northeast Missouri compared to the other sites in a different part of Missouri, and the productivity was actually higher in the population where a higher percentage of the males were being harvested. Now, again, that's just two things, so we need to take caution in that.
But and you have to remember in this dynamic, it has to do with the proportion of males that are harvested and when they're harvested too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so. We have several hypotheses here, and we are trying to figure out what we have evidence to support or not. And I do not think that we are done with that issue. And we've got a lot of experiments that are going on where we're going to get at it better, and we're going to keep coming back to it because it's obviously an important issue given that it affects all turkey hunters.
Yeah.
So, and it's something that, we have to make decisions on. And when I say we, I'm just talking about the community, the practitioners, the agencies that are trying to, manage a really tricky situation. We have to make decisions on things like when you can hunt and how many you can take and all that sort of stuff. And that's really difficult, to address. But I haven't seen the evidence that points me to that being a clear mechanism, at least the timing. But I have heard some reasonable argument to suggest that we should maintain that as a plausible hypothesis.
Yeah.
The timing and pressure in general, and we're going to talk about that a lot in the upcoming episode, with someone who I'm not going to say is championing that hypothesis, but he did bring up the hypothesis and talked about it in detail. And he's, Brett Collier has done a ton of work on turkeys, and he's bringing a valid hypothesis to the table that I at least had not thought about. Because one of the things that you and I have said, I think you just said it in that recap episode, the density dependent argument that Adam was talking about some, which kind of spawned us to do a bunch of these other follow-up episodes. That was something that we could understand how that could show similar patterns across all these populations. But when Brett came on, he talked about another mechanism related to hunting that could potentially produce a similar pattern. So I think, that's not necessarily definitively settled, but the Mississippi and Tennessee studies are definitely great data points to, start addressing that issue.
Yeah. And I mean, I think as we get additional replication on this issue, as more studies come out and the results from those studies, we'll have more clarity on it. But, right now, I still feel like, and we'll explain more of this in the density dependence episodes, but to me, that's a more plausible explanation for the widespread declines we're seeing right now. Especially in light of these recent studies not documenting a clear relationship between timing of opening season and reproductive rates.
Related to that, we talked about the Mississippi study. They didn't actually observe a decrease in the number of birds harvested from the moving of the dates. But somebody brought it to my attention that there are some other data from some states that have moved things where they did see less harvest just from moving the dates, I think. But that was a good point. Another thing along that same line, one listener pointed out that in their state, which I have not hunted in, they actually do manage the turkey permits, even at the county level, I think he said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that one.
So what I didn't mean to imply, and I don't think anybody did, that you can't do that or that no one is or that it's a novel idea. But it's pretty uncommon in the Southeast, at least, to do things that way. And, I think we all agree that we would love to be able to get to a point where we can manage at the scale that we need to for things like that. So it may become a little more complex, but, if it's better for the resource, then maybe we need to do that.
Yep.
So,
well, those are all the main listener feedback questions that I had or comments. Did you have any other ones that stood out?
Well, I had a few other little tidbit things, but those were the main ones that really challenged me, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad that people are reaching out and telling us this stuff. And again, thanks everybody for your support. And if you think it's a good idea, leave us a review with your question that you'd like us to cover. If you've already reviewed it, thank you. And you're welcome to send it through one of these other platforms.
Yep. And one thing that I heard yesterday that might incentivize people even more so to leave a review is I talked to Chase Grubbs with Turkeys for Tomorrow, and he mentioned that we could start a system where we randomly pull some of those reviews and put them in a drawing for a TFT hat.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So if you want a TFT hat, that's just a little bit additional incentivization. And worst case scenario, at the end of the day, you help us spread the word to more people. Best case scenario, you spread the word and you get a TFT hat.
Yeah, get a sweet hat. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that glad you brought that up. Glad TFT is doing that. Yeah, they've been a great help to us, obviously, and we're really appreciative of that. I'm glad also that habitat workshop that you're going to do. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep. That was one thing that I definitely wanted to mention. So they're helping fund that. That's their first habitat workshop day, and they're doing it with in collaboration with the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, as I've mentioned, in addition to sponsoring this podcast, TFT is sponsoring a significant portion of my Alabama work. And then one thing that we failed to mention too is that TFT is helping Craig Harper extend that study that he came on and talked about in Tennessee.
Oh yeah, another year, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think we talked about it extending a year, and TFT. Another thing, in terms of talking about us all coming together, something that is inspiring to me is the NWTF and TFT are both providing funding to several projects.
Yeah,
and that is a really awesome thing. Like
including mine. Yeah, the Alabama chapter of NWTF has come in a big way to help us sponsor the work that we've got going on here in Alabama.
That is great, and folks out there, reflect on that give feedback like that to these organizations. Let them know that you really care about the resource and you want them to help each other help the resource.
Yeah,
they're both sending me funding too. Not for the same project, but I have funding for turkeys from both organizations. So
yeah, and them coming together to partner on a research project like that is not a business decision. That is a turkey conservation decision.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. All right. Well, I think we've kept folks long enough. If we didn't get to your question, let us know that you'd like us to cover it. And we're going to have to set some kind of threshold for these, Will. But if folks want us to keep doing bonus episodes, blow us up.
I feel like you've suddenly roped me into 2 episodes a week now.
Well, one in real time and one
these are fun, though. These are fun.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm all about it. Obviously, we both are. We wouldn't be sitting here, with an unplanned, essentially, session to address these questions and concerns and comments and everything that people have. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And we hope you're enjoying the content and that you're helping us share it.
Yep. Thank y'all. We really appreciate it. Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.